Walking around the city with Nantian besides her, Shiro navigated her tablet and checked up on all the available information. Right now, they were making their way to the military, so that Shiro could have a look at the situation herself. After all, it was different seeing things in person and seeing it on a screen. Only when she saw them in person would she be certain of their capabilities. Plus, she needed to start preparing them for mech training, as that would make up a large portion of their military in the new age. Most of the shops around this district are focused on selling foods and daily necessities, and there is little to no adventurer gear such as potions and weapons. Perhaps we should name this street on the map so that people can find it easier, Shiro muttered. What should we even call it? Nantian asked as Shiro paused for a moment. Who knows, I'm not exactly great with naming. Maybe we can call this place the non-adventurer shopping street. Shiro joked as Nantian laughed. What kind of name is that? He asked as Shiro shrugged. I don't really focus on non-adventurer things, so it's probably better to get someone else to name this. Shiro smiled as a young girl walked up to her. Your Highness? The girl called out as Shiro glanced towards her. Can I help you? Shiro asked with a smile as the girl gave her a flower. Thank you for giving us this city, the girl said as Shiro paused and accepted the flower. You're welcome. As long as you're safe, I'm happy. Shiro replied as the girl nodded her head happily and made her way back to her parents. Giving her a small wave, Shiro looked at the flower and raised her eyebrows. The flower was a rather simple blue-colored flower that only had a few petals. Putting in her hair, Shiro grinned and glanced at Nantian. Fufu, do I look good in this? Shiro asked, as Nantian nodded his head. Of course, you look good even without it, Nantian replied as Shiro shrugged. Smooth. Anyways, setting aside the naming of the street, we need a place for all of the adventuring tools. Right now they're kind of scattered as the blacksmiths are towards the east while the alchemists are towards the south. I'll have a few drones. Talk to the residents and have them move to a specific location if possible. That way, it's easier to access. Maybe I should also make some teleport zones around the city since it's rather large, Shiro said as Nantian thought about it for a moment. Maybe it's better to not add teleport spots so that they can explore the city a little. Plus, even if they do need one, there can be transport, Nantian replied. I agree. But the main problem is people flying? If a transport vehicle slams into someone or vice versa, it'll be annoying to deal with. Do you think we should have a permit for flying? I remember people having car licenses in the past, so maybe something similar to that. It's only when you have the permit can you fly, Shiro suggested. We can always give it a try. If it doesn't work out, we can just get rid of it. It's an ambitious project, this city, so it's expected a few things might go wrong. The fact that everything is proceeding smoothly is rather surprising. Nantian smiled as Shiro agreed with him. I'll set that aside for now then. What about entertainment? Are the citizens finding it adequately entertaining? It doesn't have to be like a festival or anything like that, but if they're bored, their thoughts about the city will dull as well. Even workaholics need some entertainment after all so that they can rest their minds, Shiro asked. Entertainment is not a problem with the internet being around, though having something interactive in real life wouldn't hurt either, Nantian suggested. True. In that case, then I'll allocate a space for activities such as virtual reality games where it trains one's reaction speed and so on. I remember a few games from Aria, so it might be pretty good. We can also make some sports halls and so on, so that the kids can play around. I'll send out some mail asking them what kind of facility they would want later today, so that we can tailor the city to suit their needs. Shiro replied, while making notes on the tablet, giving out instructions to the drones. They soon arrived at the military grounds. Seeing Nantian, a few of the soldiers quickly bowed, but when they saw Shiro, they kneeled, since they needed to show respect to the person who built all of this. There's no need to bow. I'm just here for a casual visit. Shiro smiled as the soldiers stood up. How are you finding things so far? Is the training adequate? Shiro asked, while looking at the large spaces full of spirits training with one another, and medical drones ready should anything go wrong. Ran obeys. Reporting to your highness. Everything is more than adequate. It's amazing. All of the facilities, techniques, and equipment is much better than what we could have imagined. The soldier replied as Shiro nodded her head. That's good. Keep up the good work. I have high hopes for you. Shiro smiled as they continued into the training grounds. That was an obvious lie. With your power, I doubt you have any hopes for spirits like them to impact an important fight. If anything, they'll be handy for conquering land without making a move yourself, but even then, you can just send a few drones to do that for you. Nimue rolled her eyes. Oh, of course, but if I say that, it might cause them to feel rather depressed. No? Plus, if I urge them on, we might be able to find some hidden talents. Shiro smiled. Speaking of hidden talents, why didn't you recruit Gnostic? For a Tier 6 demon, he would have been extremely helpful in our group. Nimue asked curiously. She wasn't there for the fight since she was occupied with her own candidate, but she did know that Shiro killed him in the end. Well, I did want to recruit him, but as the fight continued, I could tell that he was having the time of his life, so I didn't want to ruin it. Plus, near the end, he was burning up everything to fight me, and once the berserk skills ended, all of the backlash would have killed him instantly. I saw his mana realm cracking and his body being broken from the inside out, so I decided to end him before he fell into a pitiful state and died to the backlash. Shiro shrugged, since Gnostic would have been a good ally. Plus, he was quite honorable. Too, so she knew that he could probably be trusted when she got to know him a little more. I see. That's quite unfortunate then. Well, I guess in a way he's fortunate. He doesn't have to go through the New Age crap that the system created just to lie to all other queens, apart from the one originating from the current garden. Shiro thought to herself as she entered the area where the supposed elites were. Looking at the spirits here and their fighting spirits, Shiro wondered if she should have a little fun with them. Camouflaging herself for a moment, she hopped forward slightly before unleashing a dense wave of killing intent. Surprised by her actions, Nantien stayed silent and watched by the side as, for the elites, cold sweat immediately dripped down their back as it felt like the Grim Reaper had just grabbed their throat. Time seemed to pause for them as their bodies tensed up. However, there were a few who managed to grab weapons and look around them in shock. Ho-ho! 3 of you managed to still move! Well done. I'll give you some extra rewards. Shiro smiled, as it was hard to move while being bathed in her killing intent. The fact that 3 of them managed to react meant that their willpower is some of the highest amongst the elites. They were able to face death head-on, even though they knew it was futile. They're the kind of people that will make sure that the final moments of their life in battle are beneficial for their allies. These were the kind of people she could trust leading a group to. What are your names? Shiro asked, with a small smile. While she knew their names thanks to the fact that they registered when they moved to the city, she wanted to hear it from them personally. Hearing this question, the 3 soldiers quickly stood upright. I'm Sheena Isirvin, Your Highness. My peers refer to me as Sheena. Sheena was the first to reply. She was a girl who looked like she was around the age of 18 to 20. She had light blue hair and a pair of azure eyes which looked at her with reverence. With the Sheena introducing herself, the other 2 quickly introduced themselves as well. Ah, I'm called Oran. I wasn't adopted into any family, so I don't have a surname. Oran introduced himself. He was a tall man who stood around 185 meters. He had short golden hair with traces of brown on the edges and a pair of red eyes. There was a scar just above his right eye and it cut through his eyebrow, making him look a little threatening. Seeing his hair and expression, Shiro couldn't help but imagine him as a cat that was scared of the person in front of him. Akes. Like Oran, I wasn't adopted into any family, so I don't have a surname. Akes followed up as Shiro nodded her head. With the way he introduced himself, Shiro could tell that he had a more serious character. He had dark red hair and a pair of scarlet eyes. He was just slightly taller than Oran, and when he was facing her, he made up to stand up as straight as possible. Sheena, Oran and Akes. Well done for being able to stand up to my killing intent. As you 3 are the only ones that reacted, I'll promote you to ranks 1, 2, and 3 for now. I understand that some soldiers here might be unhappy since their power might not be the strongest. But in a battle, if you can't move under your opponent's killing intent, having strong power is useless. These three will be the first ones to be able to react should a strong enemy attack, and therefore they have the capacity to lead you. For now, that is. As you continue to train, I hope that many of you can hone your willpower so that you too can move while being assaulted by my killing intent. Shiro smiled as the soldiers performed a rather impressive salute towards her. Yes, Your Highness. Hearing this, Shiro nodded her head before turning to the three spirits. You three follow me for now. Shiro smiled as the three spirits nodded, their heads. To them, it was a great honor being able to walk alongside the one who had created this entire city and filled their libraries with vast amounts of knowledge. The martial art manuals that they see in the army libraries were also provided by her. Doing a few checks around the training grounds to make sure that everything was satisfactory, Shiro had the drones prepare an empty training hall for now since she wanted to talk to these three for a bit. Arriving at the training grounds, Shiro glanced over at Sheena. Since you were the first one to introduce yourself, why don't you tell me a bit about your powers and the element you use? Shiro asked with a smile. I'm an ice spirit, and all of my powers are related to ice. I can control water to some extent, but it'll get taken over if a water spirit decides to interfere. Sheena replied, as Shiro nodded her head. I see. I also started off as an ice spirit. The power of ice is very helpful. It can act as both offense and defense, depending on how you want to use it. Shiro smiled before turning to Oren. What about you? What element do you use? I use lightning and earth. Out of the two, I'm more proficient with lightning. Oren replied, I'm handy. Earth counters lightning, so if the enemy uses the earth element, as a spirit, you should be able to override their control. Shiro said while making a mental note on their powers. Ranobes. Looking towards Akes, Shiro asked. The same question. She was half expecting him to say fire, but his answer surprised her. I'm a blood spirit. All of my skills are blood-related, whether that means I use my own or my opponent's. Akes replied as Shiro paused in surprise. That's quite rare, Shiro said as Akes nodded his head. So right now, we have ice, lightning, earth, and blood. All right, take these for now. I want to see what you can comprehend in 1 hour. Shiro grinned as she handed all of them a manual. Flexing her finger, 3 chambers were created in an instant, and mana from astral horizons filled the chambers thanks to a small portal she created. They'll find it easiest to find inspiration in a mana-rich area, so this was perfect for them. Understanding what Shiro wanted them to do, the trio entered the chambers. Making 2 chairs, Shiro sat down and created a table before grabbing some juice from her inventory. Want one? Shiro asked as Nantien nodded his head. Seems like you want to give the 3 a bit of special training. Nantien smiled. They managed to move around in my killing intent after all. For spirits like them, doing so would be extremely hard, and yet they managed it. I don't know what they had to go through to have such a strong willpower, but this kind of willpower is what will keep them going and push them to greater heights. All I'm doing right now is give them a small boost to kickstart their improvement. Shiro replied while taking a sip of her juice. For Sheena, I gave her a manual. On some of the more powerful skills I know for ice. It includes a few skills from the Frozen Hell series that Big Sis said would be helpful. But I haven't managed to finish the series just yet. I don't know what is needed to finish it, and since I've been focused on my nanobots, my ice has slowly lagged behind. Oren has 2 elements, so I gave him a manual on lightning, earth, and a few fusion concepts. If he can somehow combine the 2 elements together, there is a chance for him to improve his lightning so that it doesn't have the weakness against earth, Shiro explained. What about Akes? Nantien asked, as Shiro didn't have any blood-related powers. For Akes, it's mostly fighting techniques, and a few skills that I remember from the people I've faced. However, there are a few questions that I threw in there to see if he can increase his connection to his element. Why is he able to control the blood in his enemy's body? What happens, and what is the process? What is the system doing for him that he doesn't have to do manually in order to control the blood? If he is able to answer all of that, and even control the full process himself, there will be a good chance to reach Tier 6 for him. After all, I believe the key to Tier 6 is an advanced understanding of your element and full control without the system's assistance. Shiro smiled as Nantian agreed with her thoughts. After reaching Tier 6, he could construct all of his spells manually and even use his skills without the system's interference, thanks to his understanding of his own attunement. As time passed, Shiro created a laptop and prepared a training program for mech pilots. Remembering some of the training back in Aria, Shiro designed it so that it was more friendly towards newbies who had never been exposed to mechs before. From VR training to small physical props that they can use and even school classes on. Shiro started to add them to the system while the three spirits were training in the chambers. Regardless of how much they comprehend, just being in a mana-rich environment will allow them to improve their constitution as spirits. Once the hour was up, Shiro saw the doors open and the three stepped out. Both Sheena and Oren had excited faces while Akes was stoic as usual, but Shiro could tell the excitement in his eyes. Now then, let's see what you have comprehended in the short span of an hour. Shiro grinned as she stood up and dismissed the chambers. If they comprehended more than what she had expected, she will give them priority in training so that they can reach the standard of the party members if they try hard enough. How will we do that? Sheena asked curiously, since most of the things she comprehended were combat-orientated. Naturally through combat. Shiro smiled. You three will take me on at the same time, and I'll evaluate your performances. If you do, very well, I shall reward you with more things. If you don't do as well as I expected, you'll get nothing. This is a one-time thing, so I hope you don't disappoint. I don't have time to continuously come back and train you since I'm busy with a few things outside, she explained as all three members had serious expressions on their face. Seems like you're ready. Feel free to start whenever. Perhaps you also need a moment to talk amongst yourselves for a strategy. After all, I don't think you have worked with one another just yet, so it may be a little difficult. We would like to have a talk with one another, if you do not mind, Your Highness, Akes said as Shiro nodded her head. Sure, take all the time you need. Walking back to Nantian, she sat back down on her chair before crossing her legs. Looking at the three talking to each other, Shiro didn't eavesdrop since that would be rather rude. Do you think those three will be able to work together well? Enough? Nantian asked curiously. Of course not. While they have good willpower, they're inexperienced. It's one thing to talk about a plan of action, but it's another to carry it out. After all, they cannot foresee everything that happens in a fight, especially since they know nothing about me. The key is how they will adapt to the change once the plan is shattered apart. How will they carry out a plan that they haven't discussed? How would they understand each other's actions, and how would they ask for help without me knowing? They won't be able to communicate silently just yet, since it's their first time working with one another, Shiro replied. However, there is the off chance that they could synergize well, so we'll just have to see what happens. She shrugged as Nantian nodded his head. Honestly, the one I'm most curious about is Akes. He seems like the strategist, since he's explaining the situation and the plan to the other two. But, with the way his powers work, I'm wondering how he would impact the fight. If he uses too much of his own blood, there is a chance he could pass out. If he uses his allies' blood, it could be dangerous for them. And as for using your blood, I doubt he would, considering the fact that you are the queen and their benefactor, Nantian explained. Thinking about it for a moment, Shiro nodded her head since that is indeed a problem. Being a blood spirit has its benefits and negatives, and in a situation like this, it would be hard to bring out 100% of his power. Understanding this, Shiro stood up once more. I forgot to mention this earlier, but Akes, feel free to use your spells on me. Taking a bit of blood won't harm me since I can take off an entire arm and still grow it back. Shiro said with a smile as all three paused in confusion. Pardon? Akes said, as he didn't understand what she meant by the fact that she could take off an entire arm. Well, basically just know that you can use your skill on me. I want to see 100% of what you're capable of after all. And just so that you three understand the situation. Summoning a sword, Shiro cut off her right now and burnt it to ashes before a small charge of grace to regrow it in an instant. You can't hurt me badly, so it doesn't matter. Shiro finished with a grin. Seeing the shock and surprise on their faces, Shiro raised her eyebrow at the lack of response. Oh my, You broke them before the fight even started. Nimue smirked. Well, I was just trying to reassure them. They can't harm me after all, and there is no danger to my life. Shiro shrugged. Who hurts themselves to this extent while explaining the situation? If I didn't know you better, I would have thought that you were an M from how much you harm yourself. Nimue giggled as Shiro rolled her eyes. It's better to show than tell. It doesn't affect me too much, so cutting off an army doesn't matter. Plus, it's not painful. Shiro shrugged. Bullshit. Cutting off an arm is obviously painful, but you're just abnormal. Nimue rolled her eyes. This was a woman who casually broke her arm and punched a hole in her stomach so that Sylvia could test out her healing spells after all. Common sense had long left her brain. Run, Obsam. Maybe. It's not a maybe, it's a definitely. Anyways, they seem to have recovered. Nodding her head, Shiro focused back on reality. So, will you use your skills on me or not? Because, like I said before, if you don't perform well, I'll be disappointed. Shiro narrowed her eyes as Akes froze in nervousness before calming himself, and nodded his head. Understood, he replied as Shiro nodded her head. Good. Shall we start then? Shiro asked as she created 2 Tier 5 magic circles. Summoning 2 normal-looking swords, Shiro stood in a relaxed position and waited for them to make a move. Looking at each other, they nodded as Oren slammed his hand against the ground. 2 Tier 5 magic circles wrapped around both Sheena and Akes, as lighting flickered on their body. Suddenly, a pillar of earth shot out from the ground, launching the 2 towards her. Raising her eyebrow, Shiro couldn't help but smile at the way Oren had comprehended the book that she had given him. What was a self-buff skill was actually used to empower his allies who didn't have this power. Interesting, Shiro thought while taking a step back and raised her sword. Just as she did this, she noticed that her foot started to freeze as the ice ground beneath her was already frozen in that short moment. Shrugging her shoulders, she bent her body back and avoided their first strikes. Sheena tried to cut her with an ice sword, while Akes tried to pierce her with a blood rapier. Looking at the 2 swords that missed their target, Shiro flexed her fingers as 2 ice pillars erupted out from the ground and slammed the 2 of them in the stomach, launching them up. Gritting her teeth, Sheena swiped her hand horizontally as tens of ice knives shot towards her. Using her left hand, Ijiro shattered the ice around her foot before cutting down the ice knives with her right hand. Just as she did this, Oren appeared behind her with lightning flickering around his body as he had applied the buff to himself. Kicking towards Shiro, earth had wrapped around his leg like martial armor, but Shiro only gave him a side glance before grabbing his ankle with her hand, stopping his kick. Seeing this, Oran quickly morphed his earthen armor into a blade so that he can force Shiro to let go. Following along for now, Shiro let go of his leg before slamming her elbow into his stomach. As Orna left melee range, tens of ice pillars erupted out of the ground and were slowly dyed red as Shiro quickly looked towards Sheena and Akes. Seeing that both of them were draining their blood into the pillars, Shiro raised her eyebrow and twisted her body, slashing all of the pillars and shattering them to pieces. Shiro watched as blood gushed out of the ice stumps. Seeing this, both of them activated Tier 4 magic circles as the blood and ice morphed into blades which shot towards her, activating a simple mana barrier. Shiro blocked all of them with ease. Surprisingly, it wasn't over as the blood and ice fused together into chains that wrapped around her barrier. Slamming her hands together, more magic circles appeared as ice chains shot towards Shiro. Realizing that this was frozen slumber, Shiro decided to expose one of its biggest weaknesses, and that was without the chains securing the target. It was hard to freeze the target properly. Stomping down with her foot, tens of blades appeared in the space around her and slashed apart all of the chains. As the chains were slashed apart, the blood that was stored inside became misted, which polluted the area. Raising her eyebrow, Shiro saw that this was probably a poison-type skill. Unfortunately, she was basically immune to poison, so doing so was actually such a waste. Walking through the mist like it was nothing, Akes was shocked since doing so would have started to cut her body since there were tiny blades in the mist. If it was a normal person. Just being in the mist was painful, never mind walking through it. If a small wound opened, he would have been able to drain her blood, but her regeneration healed all of the small cuts instantly. Arriving before the two, Shiro smiled. Anything else? Taking a deep breath, Sheena sprang to action and slashed towards Shiro, which was parried with ease. Final surprise attacks are good, but just flailing your sword is a waste. Even in your last moment, don't forget to think about your options. Don't become a mindless person who just swung a sword, because it's the first thing they could get their hands on, Shiro said as she let go of the blade. Flexing her fingers, green fire wrapped around their body as their wounds were healed up. In an instant, teleporting Oren in front of her. He was surprised to see all of his wounds disappear in an instant. Let's see. First we'll start with Oren, I guess. You did well in giving your allies a speed buff, and using your magic to propel then was also a good move on your end. However, after that, your participation was limited, so you'll need to work on your follow-up. In most fights, it doesn't end with that first attack, so make sure you can continue to support your allies, Shiro explained as Oren nodded his head. He couldn't help but feel a little down, since, like Shiro said, he barely helped after the first attack. Next is Sheena. You did well in supporting Akes during your attack. Your use of ice was good, and the first move of restraining my movements were perfect. There is just one problem, though. You don't take the initiative when using your spells. You let your allies attack first. When the blood was being fueled into the pillars, why didn't you take that chance to attack me? That kind of delay is dangerous, and could prevent you from claiming victory. Staying silent, Sheena contemplated what Shiro had said. It was true that she hesitated since she knew that she couldn't beat Shiro on her own. That's why she wanted to wait for her allies to attack before supporting them. Last is Akes. You were able to synergize well with Sheena by using both ice and blood together. As for your combat senses, they're low right now, but they'll get better the more you fight. The main thing is the use of your poison near the end. Strong people will have strong regeneration. The fact that you aimed for making tiny cuts may work on lower-leveled people, but would be less effective for those higher-leveled. While poison may not work on me due to my high resistances, it is a powerful tool that can help you win even if you can't harm them physically, since the poison will harm them from the inside. Though that is dependent on the strength of the poison. All in all, the three of you performed pretty well, and all that's missing is fighting experience. Of course, my expectations for you were a little higher than this since there was much more. You could have done with the tools that you were given, but it doesn't mean I'm giving up on you. I'll give you another test in the future, but for now, take this. It's a slightly more advanced copy of the manual that I gave you, Shiro said, as she handed them each a book and a cylindrical object. What is this object? Sheena asked curiously. Remember? The chambers that I made for you, this will recreate that for you. But there is a limited amount of uses, so make sure you make every use count. Of course, you can use it all at once if you are able to keep up the concentration, but I don't recommend it. And Shiro smiled as the three nodded their heads. All right, you can go back to the training ground now. Also, I do hope that you don't show the contents of the book to those who have not earned the rights, okay? Shiro smiled. What she didn't tell them was that she'll know the moment they share the contents or try to trace it down, since there is a sensor that will send her a signal if they do. Watching the three leave, Shiro massaged her neck. How come it was just temporary? Knowing you, it could have been permanent, so that they could take advantage of the amount of mana on astral horizons. Nantian asked curiously. If I made it permanent, they might get lazy. Having it so that it's limited will make them work harder, so that they can get it again next time I test them, Shiro replied, while swiping up with her hand. A giant holographic screen appeared in front of her, as it was something similar to the command center. Let's see. I'll activate the camouflage for now and increase our altitude. The demons are getting a bit restless, and a few are trying to approach in order to investigate this place, Shiro muttered while tapping the screen a few times. As the city disappeared into the sky, Shiro activated a few other defensive systems before dismissing the screen. Robies. Right then, shall we head back then? The main goal of today was to visit the military and see if there was anyone who was talented. I've already allocated their rewards so that when they go back, they should receive a package with their new privileges. The main goal for tomorrow is to visit the hospitals and schools, and see how they're faring. Shiro smiled as Nantian nodded, his head. As the two made their way out of the base, they walked through the shopping district. Naturally, to enjoy it as normally as possible, they activated disguise so that they could see what would happen when the ruler isn't around in person. Thankfully, the city seemed to be running normally, as there were no scandalous activities in shops or bad pricing, which made Shiro sigh in relief, since a city of this scale was a first for her. Previously, her main goal for a flying fortress would be to just focus on fighting, as that was the only reason she would even make it. Sometimes she might add a house or two for her own comfort, but that was it. This time, she had to migrate the spirit race here and make sure that living here was no different from the other cities, or even better since she has the advantage of technology. Thinking about technology, Shiro turned to Nantian. Do you think I should introduce more of the things from Arya here? If this becomes a technologically advanced city, more options should open up for the civilians. Shiro asked as Nantian shook his head. Maybe, but that might be a bad idea considering that they have no obligation to stay here and could share information easily. Sure, you can control the information with your nanobots, but doing so would be no different to a dictatorship. Of course, I also understand that most of the people here are spirits and that you are their queen, but you never know. It's better to be safe than sorry, and having too much power, technology, and so on can bring severe consequences. Nantian shook his head as Shiro sighed and nodded her head. She also understood, but a part of her wanted to share this treasure. A trove of knowledge. What a shame. I have all this knowledge but can't share it without the chance of people misusing it. Shiro thought with a shake of her head. That's just how it is. A real shame, isn't it? Some of the things that you can add are quite handy too. Nimue sighed as Shiro nodded her head. Exploring around for a little longer, Shiro eventually arrived back at the main tower. Saying goodbye to Nantian for the night, Shiro returned to her own room and sat down in front of the table. Thinking about it for a moment, Shiro was tempted to go for a drink. Surely she wouldn't destroy her own tower, right? Shiro, don't even think about it. Just stick with juice. Nimue sighed. It's just a cider. It's pretty much juice. Plus, you saw how much it took to get me drunk last time. It'll be fine. Shiro pouted slightly, since the ciders were quite tasty. You wouldn't even know when you became drunk. Last time you thought you were fine, but the moment you tried to stand up, something clicked and the house was destroyed. Nimue lectured as Shiro sighed. Fine. I'll stick with juice then. Shiro pulled out some juice from her inventory and started to work on maintaining the city along with adding new things from her room. Once she was done, she summoned Ati and slept with him on the same bed. This was the first night she spent on Asharia. For the next week or so, Shiro continued to manage the city while waiting for Madison to wake up. But so far, she had shown no signs of waking up. Helion was keeping an eye on her, while also opening his commissions again for the citizens. They would request certain types of armor and weapons, while he would forge in his room next to Madison's so that he could react whenever there was movement. As for Arim, she requested a mage's tower of sorts, in its own section of the city where the Imena from astral horizons continuously flowed through the tower. Of course, they made some adjustments so only the top of the tower would have the full experience. The lower down the tower you are, the more diluted the experience is. Only those that are the most talented can go to the top, and Arim is the Yol. Judge since she is the most magic-focused person compared to everyone else in the party. Yin was being Yin. She went around eating everything she could get her hands on. Since the spirits knew that Yin was Shiro's daughter, they naturally treated her without any payment, and Lysandra would go with her as a supervisor. If Lysandra wasn't there, Yin would have eaten everything up. The two of them were rather popular, with both the younger spirits and the older ones. The older ones preferred Yin since she was like a gluttonous granddaughter, while Lysandra was more silent and refined, which caused the younger spirits to look up to her. Naturally, Shiro let the two of them enjoy themselves as she was setting up the mech training program for spirits that were less magically endowed than others. Even if they can't use magic, the use of mechs would help offset that fault for them. Lyrica and Isilia were training with each other and spending some time bonding as a family, while Sylvia and Chen Yu decided to get a house not too far away from the tower. As for how they spent their time, Shiro didn't pry into it, since it was their private time, and doing so would be extremely rude. Nantian didn't have much to do other than assist her every now and again. He would spend the rest of his free time meditating so that he could increase his level. Today was the 9th day that Shiro had spent on Asheria, and she was planning on opening the class for mechs, as well as a mech demonstration. However, other than having the mech fire off a few weapons or activate a few spells, there wasn't much else she could do to demonstrate its power. Therefore, Shiro had a great idea. She was going to piss off a hydra in its lair that she had found, on the full map shown by the system. Compared to the other hydras she had seen, this one was in a league of its own, and naturally, it was the perfect candidate for her mech demonstration. Plus, there was more than one hydra in this lair, so it was also a good time to show off what Asheria was good for. The weapons on this fortress weren't installed for decoration after all. Sharing this idea with Nantian, he had his worries, but in the end, he decided to roll with it since Shiro seemed to have everything under control. There were two choices for Shiro. She could either pilot the mechs remotely and demonstrate one of its functions in order to ensure pilot safety, or she could pilot it in person, which would bring better results as she was manually operating the whole thing. After considering the options, she decided to get Sheena to pilot one of the mechs remotely. Naturally, she was shocked as she had never piloted a mech before, and yet Shiro wanted her to demonstrate on a large stage where everyone in the city would be watching. If her parents watched her mess up on the big screen, she would be terribly embarrassed, and since it was remote, they'll be watching her on a stage. Don't worry about it. I'll be helping you remember all of the controls in just a single day. Shiro reassured with a grin. But seeing that grin, Sheena couldn't help but feel a shiver down her spine, while both Oren and Akes felt pity for her. Of course, they weren't forgotten either, since Shiro reminded them that they would also be piloting a mech, depending on what happens. While their magic prowess and willpower was good, the mech was another way of attack which doubles as a shield. Once this shield breaks, they'll fight in person. This mech was essentially an extra life for them, one they got used to the controls. Bringing Sheena to the mech hangar, Sheena watched in shock as hundreds of mechs were being made simultaneously. Drones were collecting pieces and putting them together without any manual assistance, as everything was automatic. Sure, Shiro could make a mech in an instant before her, but that would defeat the purpose of having drones and programs designed to automate everything so that she didn't need to bother with it. Even for Shiro, manually handling everything, little thing that happens in this city would be stressful. Handling a few at a time was fine, but everything was not. Therefore, having programs do this decreased the number of things she needed to keep her eye on. Renobi. Naturally, she couldn't just leave it to the programs and forget about it. She would do some maintenance herself to make sure everything is in working order and that there were no glitches or errors. Creating a small simulation box of sorts, Shiro had Sheena enter it and complete the tutorial of the mech while she projected herself as a hologram. Testing. Testing. Shiro made sure that the hologram was working before looking at Sheena. Seeing as her avatar was a little big right now, she shrunk herself to the size of a palm before floating near Sheena with her legs crossed. Right then, as you can see in front of you, you have two glove-like objects in front of you. Two left panels and two right panels. The old mechs had a bunch of buttons and crap, but don't worry, most of the startup is done for you. If there is a situation where you have to do the startup manually, just insert your mana to kickstart the ambient mana absorber. If there is no mana in the atmosphere, the mech won't run regardless. However, if there is some mana, the nanobots will begin to restart themselves and activate the mech for you. Both of the left and right panels are for weapons while the gloves are for control. The screen above you is the damage that you have sustained, and the screen in front is your map. I want you to put your hands in the gloves for now, Shiro explained, and Shaina nodded her head with a serious face, but she couldn't help but think that tiny Shiro was cute. Despite the amount of killing intent she felt during their first meeting as well as the follow-up spa, the small Shiro was just too adorable. Right now, especially when she crossed her arms and explained things with a confident smile. Is there something on my face? It's the first time I made myself a hologram to train another pilot, so if it glitches, it's understandable. Shiro asked as she created a second hologram and looked at herself. Seeing that there were no glitches, she sighed in relief. No, it's nothing. I just spaced out for a moment. Everything is a bit overwhelming for me, Sheena replied as Shiro nodded her head. If you think this was overwhelming, you should have seen the old mechs, Shiro laughed, as she could remember the inefficient junk of the old ages. So many buttons and switches for things that could be linked up with a simple program. Putting her hands in the gloves, Sheena felt something connect with her mana as the screen started to light up. User confirmed, registered trial pilot Eero 1. Sheena, cranial connector link confirmed. Glove connector link confirmed, please take a step forward. Following the instructions, Sheena stood a step forward as 2 discs for her foot appeared and magnetized to the bottom of her shoes. Stumbling for a bit, assistant arms dropped down and connected a chest piece to her so that it could help her stabilize herself. Pilot confirmed. Connection to Unit Exodus MK2 confirmed. You're not in a real mech right now, so just try to stabilize yourself and try to walk. It will simulate everything quite realistically, even the feedback. Once you're done walking, we'll move on to other movements such as running, crawling, swimming, and flying. Shiro grinned as she pointed towards the tutorial progress bar. Show 1% complete. Seeing this, Sheena glanced at Shiro with a pale face. I'm supposed to get this done in a day? She asked hesitantly. Yup. Shiro gave her a thumbs up. Her Highness said that the mech demonstration was going to be today. That's why everyone's gathered at the main square, but where's Sheena? I know she's going to be used for the demonstration, but it's been a whole day, hasn't it? Oren asked as Akes stayed silent. I don't know. If it's a demonstration, there's no need for Sheena, is there? She doesn't know anything about these mechs. Akes shook his head. Well, Her Highness did say something about training, but what can you even do in one day? At most, I think they would have Sheena enter a mech, but that's about it, Oren said, while looking at the crowd that had gathered at the main square. Whistle. That's quite big, isn't it? I'd say it's pretty much everyone in this city. Oren glanced at Akes, who nodded his head in agreement. Last time Her Highness made an announcement, she gifted everyone the Asheria. They would naturally expect her announcements to be something grand. Akes explained, True. Wait, isn't that Sheena? I almost couldn't recognize her then. Sheena! Oren called out as the distant Sheena turned towards them with a lifeless expression. Oh, it's Oren and Akes. Are you two here to watch as well? Sheena forced a smile. Currently, she was wearing a hoodie version of the uniform to block out the light since it was too bright. Yeah, we are. Are you okay? You don't look that well. Oren asked in worry as Sheena only chuckled. I'm fine. I just need some sleep once this whole thing is over. Sheena yawned slightly as Oren nodded his head. What does Her Highness need you for, though? It's only been a day, no? Are you just going to enter a mech then get out? Oren asked. I wish. Haha, I had to spend the last 24 hours doing a goddamn tutorial, and Her Highness watched with a sadistic smile. I didn't know something so small could be both adorable and sadistic at the same time. Do you know how it feels for her to say good? Luck I believe in you, then immediately thrust you in a flight sim against flying targets? Activating 2 rail cannons support anchors so that I don't miss my shot, making sure the right thrusters are on so I don't go slamming against the ground. The feedback of the whole system and melee combat in that thing is cursed, damn it. Cursed, I say. Sheena complained as the two were taken aback by her attitude, since she wasn't like this a day ago. Was that a bit too much for you? Don't worry. You'll have more than a day to complete the tutorial so you won't have to go through all of this. Yeah. Clicking her tongue at the end, Sheena pulled her hood up and made her way to the back. Staying silent, the two glanced at each other and couldn't help but cough awkwardly. Do you think we should treat her to a meal since we're technically the ones who volunteered her? Oren forced a smile. Maybe. But she was quite enthusiastic about the chance anyway. I couldn't take it away after seeing her expression. Akes nodded his head. Well, maybe we should think things through when we accept something from Her Highness. While the rewards are good, the risks are just as high. Oren said, remembering what Sheena became after a day with Shiro. Shivering slightly, he sighed and prayed that he won't have the same outcome as her. When it reached midday, Shiro appeared in the middle of the stage as the chattering quietened down. Like before, I'm still not good with speeches, so I'll keep this short. As you know, in this world, talent with magic is top priority. Even warriors use magic to empower their skills, enhance their body, and so on. What if I told you that talent in magic is no longer needed? Even if you have the poorest talent, as long as you are willing to put in the effort, I can make it so that you can surpass those with better talent, but don't work as hard. This is where the mechs come in, mechanized giants fitted with some of the best weapons and spells that I can provide. With a single press of a button, you can launch spells that are recorded in the mech during a battle without needing to cast it yourself. Naturally, if you have your own spell, you can also cast it using the casting system that is integrated on the mech. For those of you who are confused at what a mech is, let me explain. Shiro grinned as she waved her hand. Hundreds of holograms appeared in the sky so that everyone in the main square could see it, no matter where they were. Spending a bit of time to explain the mech's systems, such as the weapons, movement, defenses, and so on, Shiro used the holograms to help explain things a little better. Naturally, explaining things using images and demonstrating are two very different things. As some of you know, the city of Asheria has been moving through the sky since yesterday. We have been traveling towards a nest of hydras so that we may show you the effectiveness of the mech. Our pilot and demonstrator of the first mech to be deployed from Asheria is Sheena Isirvin, a talented soldier who I have personally trained in using the mech. She will be attacking the nest by herself. Normally, a soldier of her standard would be using a specialized unit tailored for her skill set. But to show you that even the most common mech can be powerful, when piloted with skill, I shall have her pilot the cadet mech to attack the hydras. I know you have your doubts, but worry not. This entire city will be her backup, as the cannons will fire upon the nest to clean up should any unexpected situations arise, but I doubt that would happen. Now turn your eyes towards the screen. Shiro smiled, before taking a step back and gesturing towards the screen that had appeared. Seeing Sheena with a serious expression on her face, while wearing a hooded army uniform with a skirt and tights, a few of the spirits couldn't help but wonder if that's really a uniform suited for piloting a mech, but they didn't say anything just yet, since this was a demonstration. Questions came later. Suddenly, a hologram of Shiro appeared next to Sheena, as she couldn't help but shiver for a moment. "Pilot Sheena, are you ready for deployment?" Shiro asked with a smile, as Sheena nodded her head. Stepping forward, she put on the gloves which automatically adjusted themselves to fit her size. User confirmed. Registered Pilot 01, Sheena, cranial. Connector link confirmed. Glove connector link confirmed. Leg connector link confirmed. Full body sync confirmed. Connection to standard unit 01 finalized. Ready for deployment. With the words ready for deployment on the screen, Sheena didn't hesitate to do some test movements to follow standard procedure so that she can confirm that everything was working. Ranesh. Standard Unit 01, no problems. Deploying now. Taking a step forward, Sheena broke into a sprint as a second screen showed the mech from the outside. Opening the hangar door, Sheena dived off Asheria and plunged headfirst towards the ground. Tapping the screen to her right a few times, several panels appeared in front of her as she navigated the menus with speed and efficiency. The spirits barely saw what was on the screen before a new menu appeared. Flight systems activated, Sheena said as the thrusters on the mech hummed with power. Bang! Firing up at full strength, the mech shot towards the ground like a meteor. Target sighted, preparing to engage. Tapping the left screen, Sheena deployed. The Mk3 orbital rail cannon as nanobots surged towards the mech's left hand. Creating the rail cannon, Sheena aimed at the nest and fired without hesitation. Suddenly, tens of Tier 6 magic circles appeared around the barrel of the rail cannon, as everyone watched in shock since the highest tier they knew of was Tier 5, but despite that fact, Sheena was actually using Tier 6 magic without any difficulties. Everyone knew that Sheena was not a Tier 6 spirit, so this already proved how powerful the mechs were. Boom! Firing a radiant bolt of energy towards the nest, the recoil of the gun immediately slowed down the mech's descent towards the ground. Bang! Landing on the ground with ease thanks to the rail cannon decreasing her velocity, she dismissed the gun before summoning 2 swords. Looking at the flames erupting out of the Hydra nest, Sheena glared at it fiercely. It's because of this that I had to go through that hellish tutorial in just one day. Die from me. And she shouted out in her mind as she activated all of the thrusters and dashed towards the burning nest with 2 swords in hand. How familiar. Lyrica muttered, remembering the rage that Sylvia had when she bit off the neck of that rabbit after some training with Shiro. Realizing what had happened, she put her hands together. Rest in peace, normal Sheena. May your sacrifice be remembered. Activating the thrusters on the back of the mech, Sheena twisted her body and slashed towards the first Hydra that she spotted. Controlling the mech took a little to get used to, since depending on the settings, it would turn a full 360 degree, while she only turned 90 degrees to the right, since it wasn't possible to spin in a circle while in the cockpit. However, after the hellish training with Shiro, she was able to get used to this small disconnect she felt with the mech. However, that was only because this was a common unit rather than a specialized one. The specialized one wouldn't have this kind of disconnect and would perform better at the cost of higher feedback. While it was possible to have every mech at the standard of a specialized unit, doing so would take a huge toll on the average pilot and could even kill them if they're not prepared. This was also why Shiro had Sheena use a standard unit. Not because it was a demonstration to show that even normal spirits could be strong, but rather a day was not enough for Sheena to get used to the specialized unit. Maybe if she was super talented, and Shiro had a full week with her without rest, but definitely not a day. I've seen the manual for the specialized unit and you want to fit all of that in within a week? Are you trying to kill the poor girl? Nimue asked with a forced smile. Foo-foo, it wouldn't kill her. If she squeezes past this barrier, she'll become someone that stands heads and shoulders above the rest in terms of power. Shiro smiled smugly. Foo-foo! My ass. If they don't squeeze past this barrier, they'll die. Heiss, first it's Sylvia, and now it's Sheena. Nimue sighed. Oh, Sheena won't be the last. When I told Nantien I want to make a task force, I meant I want to make something similar to the party we have now. While they may not be the same in terms of power, bloodline, and so on, the task force should still be able to do tasks for me without me worrying about their safety. Sheena, Oran, and Akis are just the first ones to be integrated into this task force. I'll be scouting for more members at a later date when they get used to the training and develop more willpower. Shiro shrugged before focusing on real life. Watching. Sheena control the mech and unleash a flurry of slashes against the chest of the Hydra. Tiny Shiro floated to her side. Hydras have increased regeneration depending on how many heads they possess. Cutting the chest will not be sufficient. Shiro reminded. Understood. Sheena nodded as she flipped the sword into a reverse grip and cleaved up, cutting deeply into the torso and almost split the Hydra in half. Sss! Hissing in pain, the 9 Hydra heads glared towards her and opened their jaws. Unleashing a poison breath towards the mech, Sheena swiped up with her hand and instantly activated all of the barriers. This was the feature that she had practiced the most during her 24-hour training, since it was what she would rely on to keep her alive when she couldn't dodge a strike. As the poison breath collided with the barrier, a bar appeared to her right, showing all of the mana that was absorbed from the attack, converting and redistributing, Sheena said coldly as she jumped back and stabbed the sword into the ground. Suddenly, a Tier 5 magic circle expanded out and 10 orbs of light appeared around the mech. Shooting towards the Hydra, they exploded upon contact as Sheena didn't hesitate to tap a panel on the right side. Removing the sword from the ground, she dashed forward as light started to flicker on the mech's body. Frozen slumber. Casting the spell that Shiro had taught her, the mech systems, assisted with her casting as Tier 5 magic circles, appeared around the Hydra. Chains shot out of the magic circles as ice immediately started to form around the Hydra. Remember, when you cut off one of the Hydra's heads, 2 more spawn in its place. Killing it is no easy task, even with the mech assisting you. However, all of the tools that you need are here. You just need to know which one to use. Shiro smiled, but Sheena only shivered since she knew the true meaning. If you can't kill it, even with everything I have given you, then you're useless. While Shiro never explicitly said that, her gaze would always pressure you, silently judging your actions in the corner while you can't say anything back. Quickly calming herself down, she swiped the right panel and activated the heated edge. Suddenly, the edge of her sword started to glow with a red hue, as each swing would leave a faint trail behind it. Arriving in front of the Hydra, she cut towards the first head, searing the flesh. The sword slashed through most of the neck with only a little bit of resistance as Sheena gritted her teeth and gave it another push. Separating the first head from the body, she could see that it was threatening to regenerate immediately. While the heated edge did slow it down, she estimated that the head will regrow in roughly 30 seconds to a minute. However, while she was doing this, the other 8 heads lashed out towards the mech and tried to chew it to pieces. Tapping the screen a few times, Sheena dismissed the swords and started to wrestle with the heads manually. While this was happening, a few pieces on the mech started to shift as mana gathered towards it before exploding out with flames. Releasing a shockwave of fire, the Hydra was pushed back as the surface of its skin was charred black before peeling. You're taking advantage of this gap in defense. Sheena rushed towards the Hydra and summoned another sword. Cutting off 2 of the heads quickly, she repeated the process of forcing the Hydra into a corner through the mech's features, demonstrating her great knowledge of how this mech worked, even though she's only been training with it for a single day. Soon, the first Hydra was defeated, followed by a second, then third. While this was happening, the spirits in the city watched in awe as they would cheer whenever she cut off one of the heads and killed it for good. Both Oren and Akes were shocked at the amount of knowledge that Sheena had learnt, since there was no doubt that the mech had more features, and Sheena was picking the best ones to use in that situation. Inze, was Sheena always good at studying? Oren asked. Not sure, but she did say that she liked to be more active than read a book, Akes replied. Then how the hell did she remember so much in a single day? Oren asked as Akes looked at the tiny Shiro hologram in the mech, who watched with a smile. It must be Her Highness's training. He muttered with traces of fear in his voice. Wait, if Shoina was the first to go and we're all in the top 3, doesn't that mean we're next? Oren asked with a shiver down his spine. But we don't have to. Demonstrate it, do we? Surely we'll get more than just a day to practice. Akes reassured, but there was no confidence behind his claim. Let's just hope she spares us. Oren prayed, as Akes agreed. After killing the 4th Hydra, Sheena was looking a little pale in the face, as her breathing was broke. Panting heavily, the feedback of the mech was taking a toll on her body, and Shiro knew this. Looking at the scan of Sheena's physical condition in the mech, she understood that Sheena wasn't in any fighting shape after killing 4 Hydras. Requesting permission to retreat, Sheena said while trying to catch her breath. Request accepted. I want you to move back to the initial landing zone, and drones will retrieve you and the mech. Asharia will deal with the rest of the nest. Shiro nodded her head. Hearing this, Sheena sighed in relief and started to make her way back to the crater that she had created when she first dropped down. Looking at the burning nest, she could see 5 more Hydras glaring at her with anger. However, sensing a surge of mana from the sky, the Hydras paused as a single girl was now floating in front of the giant flying fortress. Seeing Shiro floating in the sky, the people that were looking at the screen were shocked since she was just on the stage not too long ago. Now then, I will show you what Asharia is capable of. Normally, I would make orbital rail cannons but not use them to their full power. However, just for you Hydras, I'll show you why they're dubbed orbital rail cannons rather than just rail cannons. Shiro grinned as her mana flared. Swiping horizontally with her hand, tens of screens appeared before her as the cannons mounted on Asharia started to move. Naturally, this was just the opening act, and the main show was for the orbital rail cannons. activating them for suppressive. Fire for now. Shiro pushed her hand out, as mana could be seen erupting out from her, but nothing was being created. Of course, this was just because what she was creating was something high into the sky, where no one could notice the tiny nanobots, gathering to form the real cannon. When she makes the orbital rail cannons, she normally just takes a small part of the overall structure, which was the cannon. Glancing towards Asheria, which had all of its guns readied, Shiro couldn't help but think it looked a little like a spiked ball from afar. Shaking her head, she swiped left before pointing at the nest. Let's keep this at 10% power output so that I can actually test out the orbital rail cannon. Shiro thought to herself, since 10% output should be enough to force the hydras into regenerating while not killing them. Snapping her fingers, she watched as Asheria's ambient mana absorbers extended from the city and started collecting mana from the surroundings. Watching the mana being fueled into the guns, Shiro started to worry, since 10% was actually a lot more than what she had expected. Cough, maybe I should dial it down to 5%, Shiro thought with worry, since the blade radius might affect Asheria if she fired it now. Dialing it down to only 3% to be safe, Shiro fired the guns. Bang! The explosion was much bigger than what she had expected, as her hair fluttered in the wind. Looking at shots traveling towards the nest, Shiro stopped the construction of the orbital cannon and erected a barrier around her. Boom! Looking at Hei, the column of fire which pierced the sky, Shiro couldn't even hear the Hydra's scream before being disintegrated to ash. Shiro, why the hell is 3% so strong? Nimue asked, as she watched Shiro casually terraform the place with a 3% powered shot. I'll be honest with you. This was outside of my expectations as well, Shiro explained with a serious face. However, this face only lasted for a moment, before she paused and had an embarrassed smile. It seems like I ignored the amplifiers I had installed on the fortress, Shiro explained quietly, as Nimue stood still. Shiro could almost hear her vein burst, which was strange, considering they're in the mana realm right now. What is the amplifier set to? Nimue asked, sounding a little too calm for Shiro's liking. Cough 100%, Shiro coughed. Are you sure? Nimue glared at her as there was no goddamn way that a 100% amplification would actually wipe out the nest off the map. Cough. 500%, Shiro corrected herself as Nimue felt something snap in her. Izuel and Estrella immediately sensed this change as they rushed to her side and held her back. Why the hell is it on 500% amplification? Besides persemanasers sounds, Nimue cursed while trying to struggle out of Izuel and Estrella's grip. Maybe you should wait outside until Nimue's calm, Shiro. Estrella forced a smile as Shiro nodded her head. She was happy that Estrella was actually calling her Shiro instead of Your Highness. But her main priority was going back and making sure she remembers to adjust the amplification. In Manhwa, the reason why she had set it to 500% was because a normal portal wouldn't be able to transport Asheria in its entirety. She had to amplify the portal so that a platform wasn't randomly left behind. Of course, this extended to the rest of the city, including the weapons. I should have a separate amplification for the weapons. After this shot, the city won't be able to teleport for a while since the mana used was more than what I expect, Shiro thought to herself as she quickly routed the guns to a different amplification setting. Looking at the giant crater at the location of the nest, she summoned Izuel and had her assist in repairing the land. Fixing the earth and regrowing the plant life, Shiro made her way back to the city and had it slowly travel back to the northern border. Arriving back at the city, Shiro saw the shocked faces of everyone who were speechless at the final demonstration of Asheria's power. With just that single shot, she could wipe any city off the map if she wanted to. While it was powerful, it had more drawbacks than just the inability to be able to teleport for a while since it drained most of the mana stored. The barriers are now a bit weaker than before, and some of the camouflage functions were disabled unless she manually provided the mana herself. That kind of power was something you would use if you had no chances of escaping to begin with. Plus, any stronger, and the fortress would also be affected by the shot. Closing off the demonstration, Shiro made her way to the mech hangar and saw Shiina next to her mech that was quite damaged from the fight. "How was your first proper fight with the mech?" Shiro asked with a smile. It went better than expected, but the feedback was more violent compared to the training pod. Shiina replied as she felt like her internals were being punched whenever she did a harsh movement in the mech. You'll get used to it eventually. Having that amount of feedback should help increase your compatibility with the mech, since in one sense, you're still using your body to fight. Shiro smiled as the feedback was intentional, as it also puts a limit of how much they can pilot the mech. Using it for extended periods of time without care would damage them heavily without them even noticing it. The feedback acts as a forced stop to prevent that from happening. Also, if the guns on Asharia were so powerful, is there even a need for the mechs? Shiina asked as the final attack wiped out a nest with ease. Men there is. The guns only work at longer ranges. If it was any closer, it would have damaged the city. The mechs are there to protect the city. Plus, for certain operations, it is better to use the mechs than the gun on the fortress. Shiro explained as Shiina nodded her head. As the two were talking for a while, Oran and Akes arrived at the hangar since they had received a message from Shiro. They had a bad feeling in their hearts, but since it was a summons by Shiro herself, they couldn't reject it. "You two have arrived." Shiro smiled as she glanced towards them. "Now that you have seen what Shiina could do, it's time for your training session." Shiro grinned and didn't beat around the bush. Blood drained from their faces instantly as they had an urge to run. However, Shiina appeared behind them with her arms around their shoulders. "We're comrades, right?" She smiled as the two tensed up. "Yeah, we are. I'm sure training with the standard units is fine." Oren swallowed a mouthful of saliva. Who said you were training with the standard units? Those are for the average recruits. You'll be using the more advanced and difficult, specialized units," Shiro said, pointing at 3 mechs in the distance that was distinctly different to the standard units. "I think if I crammed everything in a week, you should barely be able to use it." Shiro mused to herself as both Akes and Oren had felt like they've just been given a death sentence. "Fufufu, I'm cheering you on," Shiina said smugly, while the Yai, too, could only cry silent tears in their heads. "When did I say you were pardoned from this, Shiina? You only trained with the standard unit, so you also need to get used to the specialized unit. Though since you've already completed the tutorial in live combat, 2 or 3 days should be enough for you." Shiro gave her a thumbs up as Shiina's face paled in fear. Before she could say anything, both Akes and Oren grabbed her shoulder in retaliation. "Say, Shiina, we're comrades, right? Fufufu, I'm cheering you on," the two said at the same time as Shiina wanted to cry. She had 2 days to get used to a specialized unit, while these two had a week. 2 days. Oh God, did I sin in my past life for you to send this devil at me? Shiina cried out in her mind. If Shiro heard her, she would only laugh. Even if God arrived, Shiina still won't get mercy from her. Strike the iron while it's hot and make her part of the abnormal standard. Time passed as Shiro created several holograms of herself to assist the 3 spirits in training with the specialized mechs. With Shiina only needing 2 days, Shiro immediately had her practice with her specialized mech once the tutorial was over. She would be sent on missions outside of Asharia, such as clearing out a high-leveled monster nest, or scouting without being discovered, so that her proficiency with the mech would increase. With a tiny Shiro by her side judging her, Shiina didn't. Indare slack and her progress was amazing as expected. As for Oren and Akes, they were less fortunate as every day of training made them want to just run away. Shiina was allowed to slowly get used to a standard mech before using specialized mechs. But these two were thrust into the deep end immediately. But since they were given a week deadline, completing the task was possible as long as Shiro cut down on their break times a little. While it was true that Shiro liked doing this, since seeing the fear in their eyes gave her a bit of enjoyment, she also needed to speed this up since the new age was coming in less than a month. If she didn't hurry and get them used to the mechs soon, as well as train some normal soldiers into getting used to the standard units, they won't be able to help much during the initial stages of the new age where everything would be open for the taking. Plus, as harsh as it was, Shiina simply showed more talent when it comes to using mechs, so her adjustment to the new systems was simply faster compared to the other two. The entire world will be changed, and once that happens, she will need to find the best spots and claim them before they're taken by others. Of course, there were more things that she needed to deal with before the New Age began, hence why the fortress was flying towards the human territory. While Shiro was focused on training Shiina, Oren and Akes, she didn't forget about the normal soldiers. Once she finalized the training plan, she had them all study in a mech school of sorts, with training capsules, for them to get used to the mechs. This time, Shiro didn't force the soldiers to learn the standard mech units in a single day, since Shiina had both willpower and talent, hence the speed. For them, a week would barely be enough for them to move around in the mechs without too many problems. Making sure that the city will camouflage itself near the border between the humans and demons, Shiro had Asfil make an announcement to the demons saying that the new queen was undergoing her evolution, and that all intelligent demons should retreat from the human borders for now. With only unintelligent demons around the border, the humans didn't need to worry about being invaded for the time being. Sitting in the command center, Shiro was resting her chin on her palm, while swiping at the screens that floated in front of her. Once she had finished sorting everything out, she leaned back on her chair and stretched her body with a yawn. I finally finished everything that I needed to do here after a whole week. Oof, and here I thought I'd be finished in 3 days or so. Shiro muttered while massaging her shoulders. Well, you are controlling the entire city alone. Completing it in 3 days was wishful thinking. Nimue shrugged. Though now that I've done what I need to do in this city, I need to take care of a few other things outside of it. I'll get Nan Tien to inform the sect master about this and have the sect move to one of the platforms. I'll also need to get my parents, Kanai and her mother, Sylvia's friend Jonas and his little disciple Raoul, my friend Yuki, Natash and Freya, in Winter's Grace, Arim's half-brother Liam, Madison's parents, Lyrica's sister, brother and the rest of the elves. There are a few more than I need to bring, but I'll stick to just mentioning these first. Shiro smiled. Are you sure you'll be able to do all that in the time left? Nimue asked with doubt. It should be possible, as long as I don't amplify. The shot again. If I do, we won't be able to teleport, and going around the world would be a bit more annoying with this big city. Shiro chuckled. Don't even mention amplification to me. Nimue huffed. Ha, sorry. I'll try to keep it in mind next time. Shiro apologized with a chuckle. You better. But before I do that, I want to make a short trip first. There's someone I've got a bone to pick with, and I know they're alive. Shiro narrowed her eyes as Nimue raised her eyebrow. But you do? I don't remember anyone like that. Nimue tilted her head, since Shiro would kill most of her enemies rather quickly. I do. He's the only one that survived because I couldn't kill him, and neither could Nan Tien, the guardian of Veren's anchor. That little shit was tier 6 and would have killed both me and Lil Tien if Lil Tien didn't reach tier 6. I'm going back there to have some payback and destroy Veron's anchor just to be safe. Shiro grinned while cracking her knuckles. Dismissing. The screens, Shiro called Nan Tien to the command center. Did you need me for something? Nan Tien asked, as he arrived at the command center as quickly as he could. Are you able to help me move more people to the city? Shiro asked with a smile. Pfft, what am I? A moving company now. Nan Tien chuckled as Shiro shrugged. Maybe. I want you to help your old man move his sect to Platform 4. While you do that, I also want you to make a short detour with Sylvia and help her get her friends to this city along with Madison's parents. Unlike her, they are indeed normal people, so having them stay in this city would be safer than outside, Shiro said, as Nan Tien nodded his head. Is there anywhere else I should go? I'll make a list for now, Nan Tien asked, as Shiro snapped her finger and a document was created in front of her. This has all of the information on the people I want to help move to the city, since it's safer for them. While I go deal with a few things, I suppose you can work on helping these people move. Shiro smiled. Flicking through the document, Nan Tien chuckled. Seems like I got my work cut out for me. With the new age being so close, it'll be quite tough to get everyone. Is there a reward for me? Nan Tien asked with a smile. What reward? Do you even want? And don't try to be smooth with me. Shiro rolled her eyes with a smile and started to make her way out. Well then I guess I'll have to think about it while you're out. Nantian shrugged. You better think fast then, since I won't take too long. I need to pay a visit to an old friend that almost killed the both of us after all. Shiro grinned. The Guardian for Veron? Bingo. Shiro grinned before flickering away from the spot. Teleporting out of the city, she flew towards the closest teleport shrine and chose China as her destination. Using the rift to increase her speed, she could sense a faint signal resembling her nanobots, only a lot more corrupted and out of control. Realizing what the Guardian must have done, Shiro couldn't help but shake her head with pity. I wanted to kill him while he was at full strength and play around with him to break his will, but I didn't think he was this stupid to actually consume nanobots. Shiro thought with a shake of her head. However, after a short while she detected more signals, and one of them was even familiar to her. Why is the world government here? Shiro thought to herself, as Grangel the dark elf that had impressed her when he fought against her near the government city. Flickering towards his location, she landed in the middle of the camp that the government had set up. Seeing Shiro's sudden appearance, the adventurers near her immediately raised their weapons. Stop! Do you idiots want to die? A voice shouted out in a panic as Shiro recognized it to be Grangel's voice. Yo, I didn't expect you to be here. Shiro grinned and gave him a small wave. Same could be said about you. This is quite a remote location. Grangel shrugged with a smile. I got a small bone to pick someone here who had almost killed me before. I hope it isn't one of us, since that would be rather unfortunate. Grangel raised his hand in defeat, since none of them would be able to stop Shiro if she wanted to kill someone. Maybe. Shiro grinned before waving her hand. I'm only joking. I'm talking about the guardian of the anchor who had made a poor life choice. Shiro laughed as Grangel sighed in relief, since that was their target too. It seems like our job will become easier since he is our target as well. Grangel smiled as Shiro raised her eyebrow. Oh? What did he do to get the government to make a move, especially with this many people? Shiro asked curiously. A few days ago, he was spotted going on a rampage nearby and destroyed quite a few settlements. Apparently, people heard him shouting in an unknown language. There were a few Tier 5 adventurers who tried to deal with him but were eliminated easily. There has been records of a failed exploration here, so the government decided to have us deal with him quickly. Grangel explained as Shiro nodded her head. Well, it's good that I came here because, I'll be honest with you, your chances of survival are less than 1% if you fight him. Shiro sighed as Grangel paused in shock. He is a Tier 6 being, and one that absorbed my nanobots too. My nanobots are normally under control, but his have gone berserk. Nanobots are able to absorb and reuse mana, so spells aren't as effective on him. Going into melee combat would be suicidal since you're just giving the nanobots more fuel to keep themselves running. I suspect that the reason why he destroyed a few settlements was to use the mana from humans to sustain himself. Otherwise, the nanobots will die off. Shiro explained as one of the adventurers furrowed his brows. Your nanobots? So you're the one. Who was responsible for all of this? He asked with a frown. Pfft, as if. It was just a side effect of what had happened. And aren't I here to take care of it? Complain to me once you can deal with a Tier 6. Shiro rolled her eyes, as people like this were all talk. Before the adventurer could even say anything, a hand grabbed his shoulder and stopped him. Please pardon his rudeness. The man smiled as Grangel looked over. You're finally here. Let me introduce you. This is Zack Soma. He's like me and is ranked in the top 5 within the government. He's a summoner and his summons are rather impressive. Grangel smiled as Zack bowed slightly. Nice to meet you, Miss Asakura. Grangel has told me about the small spar you had between the two of you, and the outcome was rather one-sided. Zack smiled as he was just a little taller than Grangel with green hair and a scar down his left eye. Nice to meet you too. Say, can't you get the eye healed with the clerics? Shiro asked, as not many would keep a scar. There is a personal reason for why I keep this scar, but don't worry, it will not hinder me in battle. Zack smiled as Shiro noticed a tinge of sadness in him when he mentioned the scar. I see. Understood. But, honestly, theirs is no need for you to make a move. since I can deal with it myself. But I suppose it's also a good chance for you guys to see the power of a tier 6. I'll act as support for now, so that you can experience its might for yourself, and I'll step in once I see that you have seen enough. Sound good? Shiro asked with a smile. Nodding his head, Grangel turned towards the adventurers. All right, listen up, he shouted out, as everyone tensed up and stood with their backs straight. We have Miss Asakura covering our backs, so there is no need to worry. However, that does not mean you can just run in there like headless chickens. This will be the first time that we will fight against a tier 6 being, and one that is out of control, at that. Thanks to the information that Miss Asakura has provided to us, we know that melee combat is a no-go considering the properties of the nanobots. Keep your distance and barrage it with ranged attacks and spells. Since it is tier 6, I can guess that its physical prowess will be much higher than even the strongest tier 5 we have here. Try not to make your presence known and prepare to move out. We're hunting this beast in 10 minutes. Grangel instructed as they saluted him before doing some final maintenance on their equipment. Minutes was long in combat, but right now it felt like a fleeting moment as the 10 minutes of respite was over in a blink of an eye. Seeing that, everyone was ready. Grangel dashed forward while the rest followed. Splitting up into 3 groups, they made their way towards the anchor, where the Guardian was, as Shiro admitted that they were rather well trained. My buffs aren't like Sylvia's, but they're not too bad, Shiro thought to herself as she made a bracelet with all of the support skills that she had recycled. Activating them all at once, everyone watched as their stats increased. To think that Miss Asakura also possesses support skills. Honestly, what class even is she? Grangel muttered with a small smile. Normally having too many skills from every class would make you weak, since different skills require different stats. But for her, she could say she's a full support class, and I wouldn't be surprised with the buffs that she had given us. Zack shrugged as Grangel agreed. Her attacks are far more powerful, you know. Plus, even though she's by her own definition a glass cannon, I could barely scratch her with my attack. Grangel explained, remembering their last fight. Renobbed keys. Regardless, we can talk about it over some drinks later. Zack smiled before biting his finger and drawing out a row of magic circles. Summoning. He shouted out as the magic circles lit up with a golden radiance. Suddenly, 8 pillars of light erupted into the sky as Shiro noticed 8 dragons with what seemed to be knights riding on top of them. How? To think his summoning skill could bring out dragons with riders. Shiro mused while estimating their powers with analysis. Individually, they are roughly equivalent to level 300s, but when put together, their coordination would probably increase their danger levels to the top of tier 5. Watching the 8 dragons' knights fly towards the ruins, a tier 5 magic circle expanded in the sky as the knights raised their lances. Boom! Crashing down from the sky, a giant golden lance pierced the ruin as ravines were split open from that attack. However, to Zack's surprise, there was something stopping the lance from making physical contact with the ruin. Before he could even say anything, nanobots shot into the sky and consumed the lance in an instant. What? Widening his eye in shock, Zack didn't expect the nanobots to be able to consume one of his most powerful strikes with such ease. Rah! Hearing a loud roar originating from the ruins, they watched in shock as 2 metallic wings unfurled into the sky. Connected to the wings was a deformed guardian with metal jutting out of his body. He seemed like a puppet that was being manipulated as clusters of nanobots could be seen writhing under his skin, which would heal all of the injuries that he suffered since he was their precious host after all. Narrowing her eyes, Shiro shook her head in pity since the Guardian didn't expect this to happen when he absorbed the nanobots. Splitting his chest open, hundreds of silver tendrils exploded out from his body as they weaved together into a giant metallic form that could wrestle the Dragon Knights to the ground. Ranged bombardment! Grangel shouted out as the adventurers prepared their spells while the Guardian was busy with the Dragon Knights. Pulling out his bow, Grangel prepared his own spell, and Zack did the same. I bet you didn't expect your precious Guardian to turn out this way when he consumed my nanobots, did you, Varen? Shiro asked, as she could sense a being watching her. The feeling she got from this being was similar to some of the gods that she had seen on Mount Olympus, and she can guess that it was probably Varen. You noticed me, huh? I must say I'm surprised. Little girl, despite killing my chosen and ruining my anchor, you actually stayed here despite knowing that I'm around. Are you looking down on the power of God? A dark voice rang out as Shiro only smiled. Maybe. Shiro replied as divine energy erupted out of her body. Pausing in surprise, Veron didn't expect the young woman that had escaped his guardian back then actually became a demigod.